Well, welcome to the Empowered to Connect podcast, where we come together to discuss a healing-centered approach to engagement and well-being for ourselves, our families, and our communities. I'm JD Wilson, and I am your host. Today on our show, we've got Sarah Mercado from the Care and Purpose Institute of Child Development at TCU, and she's going to talk to us all about her journey into working with the KPICD, as well as her earliest experiences with Dr. Pervis, stories of early days of KPICD working and growing and setting these big, hairy, audacious goals, as Dr. Cross called them, and then her own experiences, both in parenting and the foster care world. Just a great, great episode with Sarah. Lots to learn from her, and she's just one of our favorite people, y'all. We really love her. And so she was gracious enough to join us. Sarah is the host of the TBRI podcast, as well as leading lots of efforts over at the KPICD, including some overseas. And so just fantastic human being. We are so glad to have her. So without any further ado, now here she is, Sarah Mercado, joining Tana Ottinger and myself to talk about her journey in TBRI. Well, as we talked about in the introduction, we do have Sarah Mercado from Texas Christian University, from the Care and Purpose Institute of Child Development. That's the last time that I will use all of those full words. I'll now say that we are talking to Sarah from the KPICD. And we've also got Tana Ottinger here, Senior Program Director at Empowered to Connect. And we just wanted to have you on, first of all, Sarah, to share your story. I feel like, and you were even saying this off the mic, or off air just now, like you're always behind the mic. You're always kind of controlling your side of the conversation. And so now the spotlight's on you.
I know. It's really not that fun. Now I have a whole new empathy for our guests on our podcast. Turns out.
So Sarah is the host of the TBRI podcast. And so we don't assume that everyone knows where to find it all the time. So before we get off today, we'll have you make sure that you say where it can be found, all the different channels it can be found on. But fantastic podcast. If you've not listened to it yet, you definitely should. But we wanted to talk today just about you and your background and how you got into the work that you're doing now. I would imagine a lot of our listeners are familiar with the KPICD just because of Dr. Pervis's work and Empower to Connect and the connection there, but might not know the size of the team that exists at the KPICD and the work that is going on now. Before we jump into that, why don't we just kind of share, how did you get into this work and how did you land at the KPICD and why?
Man, that's a good question. And it started, so I was working in foster care, I don't know, 10, 12 something years ago in Austin. And we had our clinical director. I had just started the ministry outreach program where we were not a faith-based organization, but we decided that we should engage in churches with more depth to recruit foster families. And I had just finished training this lovely, lovely group of amazing families. And that day, our clinical director came back from TBRI practitioner training and said, "Stop, they have to have this." And I was like, look, I don't care what like TPQD is or whatever those letters are you're saying, which was TBRI. Like, I need to get these families going because, you know, if you've worked in foster care, you're just desperate to have great families to serve these kids. And that turned into me going, I don't know about this. I worked in juvenile justice settings. I worked with, adjudicated teen boys. Like, there was behavior that I didn't think this TBRI thing could touch. And that ended up transitioning into she literally bet me to do TBRI in my home because I was such a naysayer. So here we are. There's nothing worse than somebody that's reformed, right? Because then they talk about a soapbox. But that led me into the very first day I decided I was just going to pay attention a little bit more when I interacted with my girls. At that time, my oldest was probably about 7, and I called her out of her room. And I don't even know what I wanted. I have zero memory of like that level of detail other than I remember actually looking at her and she looked back at me with fear in her eyes. And I looked down and, I came from a very consequence heavy family. It was,
Yeah.
there was not a connection component to, the way I was raised. The adults said it, you did it. I mean, really, before they finished asking, you guys might be familiar with this.
Sure.
And I just
Yeah.
looked at her and just started to cry, which was probably very confusing for her in the moment, since that wasn't a norm, and said, I
Right.
don't know what we're going to do here, but this isn't it.
Mm.
And that began the journey. And then really fast forward when I got to go to practitioner training. And at that time I had been invited to be on the steering committee of the Travis County Collaborative, which is where I met Dr. Pervis and Dr. Cross. And when I did that AAI, it was just it was like the turning point for me to say, like, something's wrong that you didn't know was wrong. And I, my attachment style is dismissive, or I like to say I'm recovering dismissive, because I'm trying real hard to be earn secure. But man, if you're not earn secure and you are, I don't know, any of the others, maybe especially dismissive or preoccupied, like we grab a hold of those things when we want to, right?
Oh,
Like I love to pull in the dismissive.
right.
And so when I did the AAI, I sat with it for about a month and finally just said, you either stay the same or you don't, and you do this for you and your kids.
Mhm.
And then I began sort of the personal work, and that's taken years. I ended up, doing the therapy. I've gone to the Making Sense of Your Worth at Halo and Building Freedom Within, and those two things sort of launched me over. Well, I almost said the finish line, but that's a lie because I don't think I'll ever reach it. But the journey has been one that literally, I thought for the first time in my life as a mom, my girls are now 20 and 22. About 2 weeks ago, I was sitting with one of them and she was in real distress. I mean, deeply, deeply hurting. And I was able for the first time to walk away from that and say, you know what, I'm a good mom. And she's in pain, right? Because for me, if something was wrong with my babies, there was something wrong with what I was doing. And for the first time ever, I felt like I actually met her need. And I didn't try to change the tune of things. I didn't try to dismiss her experience, right? Like I thought I can be a good mom and not be able to fix the situation and meet her need. So, talk about a journey that's probably 13 years in the making
Oh
of.
my gosh. Yeah.
So anyway, join the Institute. I'm a training specialist there. I host our podcast. I have sort of a three-prong job. I'm primarily responsible for Eastern Europe on the training and consultation side. I host our podcast, and then I also help a lot with our what we call human logistics of our practitioner training. So that's it in a nutshell.
I mean, pretty big nutshell. Like,
That's in a
it's a lot. I wonder for you, did you have a first experience of like when you came on? Let me preface this question with, I think for a lot of us who ever got to talk to Dr. Pervis, hear her teaching, see her. I mean, in my context, it was like through the Empowered to Connect conference, like watching her teach in this setting where all of a sudden I was wrecked because the traditional way I was parenting wasn't working. And then I was getting answers on why from this mystical hippie woman that seemed to not have any like she seemed to not have any flaws, right?
Right.
Was there an experience when you first started working there that you remember like understanding what all the hype was about with Dr. Pervis, or did you get to see that beforehand because you were training with her?
Yeah, it was beforehand. So when we were doing the Travis County Collaborative, I got to meet with them monthly, and like, what a dream, right? Like I was literally like, kind of Forrest Gump just kind of bumps into the next thing. That's how the Travis County Collaborative was for me. I was the only person on that steering committee that it literally didn't make sense with the position that I was in my org to be there. But the right person said my name. And so it was so much fun because I didn't have a lot of the pressure that the other people had within their orgs to be there. So I could just like freely interact. And, but I remember, we hosted a few practitioner trainings, and I actually got to go to mine in Fort Worth before that. And like I said, I was a naysayer, but I just remember there was something about her where she saw the kids differently than anybody I had ever been around, right? If you've ever, 20 years ago in residential, there was no preciousness to the child, right? Like we didn't even know what that meant. That wasn't even a thing. It wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't a word we were calling to mind.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And I like sometimes I look back with regret, but I also look back with a lot of grace because we just didn't know. Right. There's still people in this world that don't know and haven't been educated on how trauma impacts our kids. So all the grace for those that are learning alongside us. But her ability to talk about these kids that are literally expressing very violent behaviors was something that I had never seen before. And it just drew me in. I just wanted to figure out, like, how can I I'm not comfortable in this judgment space of these kids. Yeah. It doesn't always feel right, but I also have some power and control issues because of my own history. And the only way I know to be a good performer in this environment is to have high structure with these kids. And for me growing up, right, a lot of dismissive people, we were performance-based people. We got a lot of accolades in our families when we did things well. And so all I knew was to bring in some power and control these kids so that it would look like I was doing a good job. But it never felt great, right? Like something always felt a little off, but I didn't know. And so I think just her ability to see truly that preciousness of kids was something that drew me in. But she was the real deal, you guys. She looked through we were really struggling with my father's health, and she helped me understand a lot about what was going on just with him. And she was the real deal. She really cared about people in a special way. So
I think something you're sharing resonates with me in that those early years of parenting, we found TBRI in a similar way. It was as a parent needing and wanting something different, but it's that like incongruence with like something, something's off. Like, that there's, I don't know, the traditional way, the way we've been taught. I don't know at that time what the books told us to do, for us. But like my intuition, it wasn't, what was happening wasn't right. It didn't feel right. Yeah. There was something about it that there was a miss. And that is what drew me. I remember hearing her the first time and thinking, she is seeing my child the way my heart wants to. I can't get past the behavior, and every other professional is telling me to go harder on the behavior, and I want to pursue my child's heart. And she is like that. I just remember like a sense of permission flooding over me. Oh, yeah. It's okay to think about your kid in a different kind of way. Right. So I ran after her because it was hope and joy and permission to celebrate like the essence of the person. Yeah. Right? It's so true. It's so true. It was magnetic. And she would talk about trauma, and she could take, if you've had the privilege of talking to Dr. Cross, he is probably the smartest man I've ever met, we'll ever meet, maybe. His ability to know and understand the science through science language is something that I have no concept of. But Dr. Pervis could talk to us in such a way that she's like, okay, Sarah, let me draw you a picture, right? And with crayon, and you're going to understand what's happening with these kids. And it just resonated with me that I was sitting with a researcher hearing things in such a way that I could literally say, I have more compassion now. Yes. So it's just something. Magic. And I think, I don't know, it's for those of y'all that maybe are new to this movement work, TBRI professionals out in the community, those that are pursuing this kind of way of being with each other. At the time, it was, I'm not going to say controversial. It was like mind altering when she started. It was so not the cultural conversation of the moment. It was, it really was up against so much traditional kind of thinking. I don't think that's the case so much. I think now it's more acceptable
Right.
to sort of parent in a way that is considering the whole child. At the time, it was revolutionary, at least
Oh,
in
yeah.
my sphere of parenting community. And I remember coming back and being like, hey, we're going to change some things and we're going to do it in secret. It was like, I was like, I am not ready yet to like parent this way and like let anybody know.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like
Right.
Mo and I like hunkered in and started making significant changes at home.
Uh-huh.
And it was risky. It felt risky, provocative, if you will,
Yeah.
to like think about behavior through this new lens of
Oh, yeah.
understanding and insight, you know?
Yep.
So
Oh, yeah. I can remember, right? I could get my kids to church 15 minutes early, dressed however they're supposed to be dressed, which is a big feat for me because I don't know how to really do that matching thing. Hair done, Bible verse memorized, or whatever they were supposed to do, their little homework in their hands and all that. And we'd be sitting in the parking lot 15 minutes early because I can't stand to be late. But the truth behind that picture is it took a whole lot of yelling and screaming and shame and pain to get us in the car
cattle
to
prodding.
go perform
Yes.
right at church and look right in the community. And now it's like, man, you know what, babies? If we're connected, we can get through anything. What the people see, the people are just going to have to see because this is real and this is not pretty. Life is hard. Relationships are messy. Development is hard, right? Like, so.
Oh,
yeah.
I wouldn't have had the language back then, but it's become, and I know this can sound maybe even kind of woo-woo, but like the freedom to just be human together and like figure out our way through with eyes of empathy and compassion is there's so much beautiful, grace-filled, compassionate freedom there. And it was like Dr. Pervis was showing us this is possible. You can have structure and you can be kind. You can help a child grow and you can do it in a sweet way, you know, help to train.
I remember the first time I heard that, like, the mind-body connection, the body keeps the score. I was like, what kind of voodoo is this? Right? Like when I was growing up, there was zero conversation. Like you didn't even talk about the body unless it was in a shaming way, but you didn't talk about what the body does and how, you know, it's impacted by all of these things. And the fact that like our head is even connected to the rest of us was almost non-existent in our worlds. And I remember the first time I actually said, you know what, I feel that stress in my body. I thought, oh no, did any of my Nashville, Tennessee teachers just hear that from my childhood? Right? Like, hope they didn't hear that. I'll be in trouble.
It's true. And maybe our word of like encouragement for this section for those listeners is like, it's okay to be brave.
Yeah.
And like change your mind about something.
Yeah.
And like give yourself permission to think and like shift your mindset or consider a new way of seeing your children. And it can be so scary and hard and confusing and bumpy, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, you know, part of that, you know, I think about TBRI and I think about that. Really what I think is we're not trying to change kids, we're trying to change adults.
Yeah.
And, you know, Dr. Pervis would tell us you can't take a child to a place of healing that you haven't gone yourself. And I think that's why when I talk about doing that work of getting to that place of I'm okay, I matter, right? Like I get to have feelings. They don't have to be pretty all the time. The only feeling, like I actually feel more than anger, which was like slightly permissed, but mostly in your room alone, or excitement, right? Like positive feelings in public, negative feelings in private. Like I can have feelings. I can have experiences that are less than charming at times. I can be less than charming at times, and I still matter. We can't take our kids there if we don't do it ourselves. And so I think about like every intervention I've ever been a part of before TBRI was about changing the kids. Just like you said, fix the behavior, make the behavior stop, do all this. And when we look into TBRI and trauma-informed work, we're really saying adults, we got to get healthy because the kids don't know the way any better than we do. But if we know the way, we can take them. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that, you know, all the work that's happening, and especially when you're trying to do it yourself as well, it feels transformational, and it feels almost transcendent. Like you feel like you've got this
Mhm.
treasure that you're taking to the rest of the world. Uh, do you recall any of the first, big breakthroughs organizationally? You came into KPICD when Travis County Collective is happening, or collaborative, and other things were happening. Can you
Mhm.
remember the first big breakthrough you saw as a part of the KPICD, where you saw it go into a place that you never thought it would go? TBRI.
Yeah. I
Great
have
question.
I have a couple of different ones. Well, let me tell you one story real quick about before I joined the Institute. We were doing
Yeah.
TBRI in the foster care organization, and we had the board came in and did a big turnover, executive leadership out, new leadership in, and I'll never forget, we sat around the boardroom table, all six of us. It was not a large organization. And we just decided TBRI is what we're going to do. And we're going to completely lead this organization through this lens of TBRI. And one of our complexities was that we were statewide. So we had 6 offices across the state. We're in Texas. And we just began to look through the lens of TBRI. So, what does it mean to empower your team? What does it mean to connect with your team? And what does it actually mean to correct your team? And so, we started to actually talk and listen to our teammates in each place. And, they'd say, we hate the laptops, that you open it in the 30 minutes of the spinny wheel of death while it decides if it's going to even turn on or not. Because at that time, small nonprofit, we're turning laptops over at 8 years. You know
Right.
how slow an
Right.
8-year-old laptop is. And we decided, well, we don't have the budget to replace everybody's laptop, but what we can do is have coffee time while it's turning on. So we bought a Keurig instead of new laptops and some coffee, right? And so
Yeah.
everybody would go turn their laptop on, and then we might staff a case. We might talk about whatever trash TV people watched the night before, but it was really just a time of bringing the team together. So
Oh, that's
we
good.
we started to look through those lenses, and we were like, well, what does it mean to correct? Because, right, often in social services, correcting is very, very challenging. And we decided developmental plans are going to be our way, not just for people who are struggling, but for high performers. So you could be on a developmental plan, and that was a really positive thing. That meant you were launching to the next level as soon as we had a spot for you, and we'd start giving. So we just started to look through all of these ways to use the principles. But what happened when you asked about the marker is it was 18 to 20 months in, we had an all staff meeting where we brought everybody in, and it was the first time we felt it back as leaders. So we pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed 18 to 20 months. So if you're in an organization that's trying to do something new, you're in it for the long haul. This is not a short journey. You're building trust, you're building relationships, and you have to persevere, because what happens for me and when my dismissive comes out is I'm like, well, just forget it. They don't even care anyway. Right? I don't need to get in there and get here 30 minutes early and fire up that laptop. So,
Yeah.
just knowing and if you're in leadership, you got to pursue this with some ferociousness. I think at the Institute, I came on, my interview was my very last conversation with Dr. Pervis. So I had this really awesome opportunity. We spent a couple hours on the phone and just chatting, and it was lovely and just such a blessing for me. So I came in, right when I came in, there was some fear that TBRI was going to lose traction because we lost her.
Yeah.
The opposite happened. Her torch turned into this forest fire.
Yeah.
And Robin Sheelander, who's retired now from our team, but she used to say, I swear Dr. Pervis is up in heaven just shouting TBRI, and people were like, I want that, I want that. But I think it's been fun to see that what was such a fear-based moment for us turned into a different kind of fear, because now we're trying to meet massive amounts of needs. But yeah, her life was so impactful. And now we continue to get better. I think we continue to get more structure and more organized internally so we can meet the needs. Externally, we have ambassador orgs like yourself that we're really depending on heavily to do the work because we can't. And I think we're just in a much better sort of functional space. Yeah. So,
I love it. You know, the places that TBRI is getting to go now, the places that it's getting to be, are not just in Texas anymore. They're not just in the various counties across, or just also in Tennessee. They're global, right? And so we, before jumping on today, are talking about, you know, different countries and places across continents where TBRI is beginning to spread. What is the future of TBRI, and where are the places that it's going right now that you see, that you think, oh my gosh, Dr. Purvis's vision is being accomplished here, and we're getting to see this happen in real time?
Yeah. So Dr. Cross wrote us a goal. He called it our big, hairy, audacious goal. His BHAG was to be in 25 states and 25 countries by the year 2025, or to have partners. At that point, we were thinking about a partner network, which we do have informal partners. Our former partnerships are called ambassador orgs. We are now on 6 of the continents. We are not in Antarctica. I don't know if it's just too cold there or what, but anyway, we're not there. So if you're in Antarctica, please call me. We'd love to chat. We're doing practitioners internationally now. Last year we did Colombia and the year before we did Colombia. We've done Ethiopia. We're going back in person to Colombia. We did 2 for Eastern Europe in 2021 on Zoom. And then, of course, we're all over the United States. We try to do at least 8 a year. 5 is typically what we have for our really big ones. And then sometimes we do some smaller ones that are sort of off the books, but nonetheless require the same amount of work. So our team is divided. People are serving the Philippines. We're in New Zealand and Australia and the Middle East, Eastern Europe, South America, or Latin America, really. Pretty much, other than, Antarctica, we're doing our best to try to serve in those places. Our design is hopefully to have leaders on the ground that we can feed, and they can feed their communities, because nobody knows communities better than the people that live there. We don't need to go in and try to change a community. We want people on the ground doing that. So we partner with organizations locally to make sure that happens. And it's hard to keep up right now, but we have a good dose of frequent flyer miles and a lot of time on Zoom. So it's kind of how it works.
For Zoom. It's interesting. I'm not going to wax philosophical or something here, but there are some things that have been benefits for us over the last couple of years that really probably have helped spread work and make connections and exponentially increase the ability to get the TBRI out in that kind of way.
1,000,000%. I mean, like, one of our rules is that our practitioners they can train outside of their organizations with permission from us, but so many of them have families that are rural, and it takes a long time to get to places and do that. Right. And that Zoom has closed the gap on people being able to get this resource. I really believe it has.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. When you talk about ambassador organizations, we don't have time, obviously, which is a beautiful thing, to talk through all the different ambassador orgs and what they're doing. How have you seen that model evolve, and how have you seen that, I guess also in the carrying out of the vision of Dr. Pervis, Dr. Cross, how have ambassador orgs played a unique role in that? And are there any particular stories you think of? And I'll take us out of it. Don't use one of our stories, because we probably already told them. And there's many of them, but I'm just kidding. But
JD's trying to give me rules.
Totally, you're boxing her in, JD.
Well, I just want to make sure that I give a balance of structure and nurture here.
Okay.
But would you mind sharing any stories that you have heard of ambassador org, impact or changes happening, and how have you seen that program really take off?
It's interesting. When I first started, I guess I've been at the Institute about 8 years now, give or take, and we would sit in the room and try to figure out what is a partner. That was the language of the day. And we did it for a long, long time because
Yeah.
TBRI is tricky, right? Like we're really raising the bar on people. It is hard. I mean, that's why I said, no, this won't work in the beginning, because I immediately recognized, like, this is going to take something from me. Like,
Yeah.
I can't just do this status quo thing anymore. Like, you
Right.
have to be different.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's something to attach a whole organization to your organization is tricky because
Yeah.
it's fluid. I was telling you about the foster care agency that I worked for. Enough of us, when the time came, I moved on, not because anything was wrong, but when enough of us did, things began to fall apart on the TBRI front. So it takes a lot of trust and faith that no matter what's going on within the org, that they're still pushing TBRI. And it's never going to look perfect, right? Like, you're going to go back. You might, juvenile justice, you might have massive staff turnover and you're back to square one. That's okay, as long as you're pushing forward. So,
Yeah.
I think about, this might sound like a really dumb analogy, but as a mom, sometimes, I used to, now they're young adults, which is lovely, but it used to be like feeling like I had to do everything. I got to do the dishes or they're not going to be done the right way. I got to do the laundry and put it away. And all of this makes me a good mom, and all of this is required of me. And I feel like those first moments of being a mom and saying, like, I need some help. Right. I feel like that's almost what the ambassador orgs do for us is we gather people in the community that know their community. They understand intimately the issues of their community. They know the systems that are around, and they're gathering people from those very systems to try to make an impact. And we can come in and do some training and do some coaching and do a lot of supporting and bringing our knowledge from what all of these ambassador orgs are doing to bring them all together. I mean, I have this vision of, like, ambassador orgs just by nature lightening each other's load because they're using each other's programs, or they're depending on each other's professionals, or because they're at such a high level in the intensity of the work. But I really think about the ambassador orgs as being one of the smartest things we ever did, because we put ourselves in a coaching position and took ourselves out of, we need to be the expert on where you are and who your systems are. And so we can call up, you guys and Mo and say, like, what's happening in Tennessee. And, even when we did our practitioner in Memphis, which was so fun.
So fun.
You guys had a room full of people one night for dinner that we can't draw them in knowing that they're the right people, right? We, as the Institute, we have the capacity to draw people in, but we need the right people. You guys were so strategic in knowing, like, this person from this org is going to meet this need, and they're in the right seat on the bus in that org. And so I think the ambassador orgs for us have really been a propellant to getting TBRI deeply into communities.
Yeah. Good.
I think as a way of, like, just piggybacking on that a little bit, the model has been our roadmap on a smaller level. I think a lot about that peer modeling, because in a small way, from the Safe and Secure program that we have here in Tennessee, we were like, oh, we can replicate that concept. So as the ambassador org, we have a few collectives across the state with a champion org that we're sitting in the coaching position, helping them in their community. And so it really is that really lovely peer modeling and, like, learning and being like, oh, this is how it feels to be in that seat. I think we can pass that along. I love it. It's been a great experience.
I do too. I think, I was thinking about the foster care organization. There was a moment where a little kid corrected me. I was racing down the hall because licensing showed up. And he said, Miss Sarah, you didn't say hello to me with good hands and good eyes today. And I was like, oh,
like, oh, dear
but
goodness.
right. That's kind of what this does, is it brings it full circle. It's like we're now in this learning cycle with each other of you guys are going out and modeling and coaching and learning from the people you're modeling and coaching, and then you're bringing it back to us, and we're all just sharing and growing, and nobody's in isolation anymore. I think for a long time it felt like we're all just fighting in our communities, and there's nothing that makes people feel less lonely than to know you're in the same fight with somebody else. Yeah.
Totally.
Sarah, as y'all look to the future, what are some things that you're excited about? Or what are some things you personally have your hand on or up to that get you excited about what's to come?
Well, there's so many things. I mean, we're building infrastructure within the Institute that we need right now. And that feels really, really good. We want to serve, Dr. Pervis, her goal was for us to serve every child of the world that needs us. And that's a really lofty goal. And we've been flying so fast and we're still moving forward, but we're doing some things with our infrastructure within the team to help us really propel forward. Sometimes you got to slow down to go fast. I think about kind of the little race car, you pull backwards and it goes forward. But so we're doing some of that. I'm really, really excited for that. I think the time is perfect for that. I have a unique job. Like you guys know, being on a podcast is so much fun. So I just get to talk to cool people all over the place all the time about the work they're doing with kids. I'm really excited about, I'm equally as excited about our stateside work and our international work. There is something really cool about seeing TBRI playing out in other cultures and other languages. We're in such a great position to realize we don't have to be the know-it-all of every culture and every language. We have to go and listen and learn and sit and allow them to lead us into their space, really. I mean, because most of the adults are in pain too. So I'm really excited to see as we move forward the work that is happening really without us in some ways. Like it's happening because of and with support from, but people are just doing it. I mean, there's a woman in Lithuania that I'm just convinced that that country is going to somehow have secure attachment in the next 5 years as a primary attachment style. And, it's just, awesome. It's just stuff like that you just see people embracing it. And, I think we all got into this probably to heal some wounds of our own and to see healthy adults. It just gives me so much joy.
It's awesome. Well, we're finishing up with Sarah Mercado. You have obviously kind of walked the journey of parenting. You've also worked within the foster care system. And now at the KPIC, you've been in a lot of different angles of parenting and caregiving. Any kind of final words you want to give of advice or encouragement to parents before we cut off today?
I think I think we all need to know we're worth it. I mean, we're worth the battle for ourselves. Like we deserve, I have felt nothing better in my life than when I was okay enough to help my kids truly, right? Not help them from what the external world needs to see of them, the Bible verse memorized and the dressed right and on the chime to church and all that. But when I sit with my kids and I don't feel shame, all of that hard work to get there was worth it. Yeah. And so I really want parents to know, we see you, we know what you're doing is so incredibly hard and so incredibly painful and so personal. And you're worth somebody coming alongside and doing that with you too.
That's good. That's good. All right. Tell us where you can find the podcast and when you guys air episodes, all of that. And tell us your favorite
anywhere
guests
y'all, baby, if I can get you to come on.
Watch it hit pause and Sarah's going to start recording.
There you go. I need Emily.
Right,
let me find Emily. Hang on one second. Podcast, I think pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast. So if they're on a platform that hosts that y'all's is on, they can probably find ours. It's just called the TBRI podcast. Awesome. I could never pick a favorite guest because they're all really, really incredible.
Right.
Everybody's just doing such great hard work. So I just really feel so lucky because I just get to hang out and chat with people.
Right.
That's where we are. Child tbri.tcu.edu is our website, so you can find more information there. Of course, we're on YouTube and all the socials.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today, and we can't wait to talk to you again.
What a joy. Thanks for having me.
So again, just a huge thanks to Sarah. We're really glad to have had her on today, and I hope you enjoyed some of those old stories as much as we did. Just the Dr. Pervis stories never get old. Stories of change never get old. When there was something that now is and exists in various capacities around the world that wasn't just a little while ago. And so just really grateful for Sarah joining us today. Make sure you go listen to her podcast, the TBRI podcast. You can find that, as she said, anywhere that you can find the ETC podcast. And so with all that said, that's it for us, for Tana Ottinger, for Mo Ottinger, for Kyle Wright, who edits and engineers all of our audio, Tad Jewett, the creator of the music behind the Empowered to Connect podcast. I'm JD Wilson, and we will see you next week on the Empowered to Connect podcast.